And we're going to start with, I think, the obvious one, the blockbuster transfer portal hit that happened just about a week ago, and that was Aidan Mahaney entering the transfer portal, leaving St. Mary's after 2 seasons. He was the Gaels' leading scorer this past year at 13.9 a game. We know all of the big moments that he has been a part of, how incredibly important he has been to St. Mary's' success over the last 2 seasons. We know this is a hit, and there's no way to kind of overlook that, especially when you then think about that Josh Jefferson left, and then you had associate head coach Justin Joyner head to Michigan, and now Aidan Mahaney is looking for a new home as well. And this is going to be a situation for St. Mary's of like it took me a few days to kind of figure out, not necessarily a few days to figure this part out, but the wrapping my head around of what is next for St. Mary's. Where do you go from here? And the more I thought about it, the more I was looking into what St. Mary's was going to have come back, the conversations that were going to be had, the more it actually set in. It's that, honestly, in my opinion, this team's going to be just fine. And I know that for a good number of people, that sounds kind of crazy to think that this team is going to be okay. And I think they're going to be even okay with the guys that are remaining on the roster, because there's a lot here. It's not like the cupboard was bare, especially at the guard position. This team was already kind of overstocked and really had the ability to mix and match with a lot of different matchups and a lot of different faces that were going to play, I think, bigger roles going into the year anyway. But now they were going to be thrust into these roles maybe a little sooner than had been previously anticipated. And I think about the names of like Jordan Ross. Jordan Ross was a really, like, he didn't get to play a ton in this past season, but as a true freshman, you saw the glimpses of what he could be. He is a pass first point guard, and we have seen over the years and years past what St. Mary's is capable of doing, what Randy Bennett is capable of doing when he has two point guards kind of running the show from the backcourt. We've seen the Joe Rayhan, Emmett Nar combinations. We've seen the Matthew Dellavedova, Mickey McConnell combination. We've seen throughout the course of the Randy Bennett era multiple times when he's had two true point guards in the backcourt. And I think we're going to see more and more of that this coming year now, with the Mahaney news having broken, and now immediately needing to see that. And Jordan Ross, I mean, I think about the NCAA tournament game this past year against Grand Canyon. The bright spot of that game to me was Jordan Ross and his ability to kind of like to really attack the basket, make plays for others. And he showed absolutely no fear in that game, where in a game and against an opponent that seemed to athletically overwhelm St. Mary's at times, that was not the case for Jordan Ross. He seemed to be comfortable in that scenario. He seemed to almost thrive in that environment. And that was really great to see. And then even think about even further back, how he was instrumental and critical in the UNLV game that they ended up winning in overtime. Again, like, this is a kid who just does not seem to be afraid of the moment, and he's going to get plenty of opportunity, I would think, going into this coming year, especially now with that second guard spot being kind of up for grabs at this point. Another one of the names that, Rory Hawke, I think, is going to fall into that as well. Rory Hawke is another name that you saw glimpses of it last year before he went down with the injury, of what he might be. And this is another guy who has a lot of upside. There was a lot there. the St. Mary's camp has talked a lot about like what he could be, and like he's going to be more of that scoring two guard, and he's a little bit more kind of fit for the size of to being like a traditional two. And I think I kind of threw out like, hey, it's like he might be the starting three. Like I think it would be kind of like an interesting scenario where you go maybe three guard as opposed to having the traditional two guard, two forward, and a center. I thought there was maybe the opportunity to actually utilize three guards with him being that third. This was all assuming that Aidan Mahaney was coming back. So I think he's another great option. I think this opens the door a little bit more for Mikey Lewis to make an immediate impact. Mikey Lewis coming in as one of the best players recruiting rating wise that Randy Bennett's ever had, and he is going to be a fascinating case study early on to see how quickly he can adapt to Randy Bennett's system, how quickly he can kind of find his role. And obviously, like really, it's kind of get up to speed on the defensive end, because we know that that's going to be still an emphasis for this squad. But this is someone who can give you buckets, and that is something that Aidan Mahaney gave you. It's something that you do need to fill in somehow. And Mikey Lewis feels like he's going to be one of those guys to be able to do it. He might have to come off the bench to do that early on, but I'm really, to an extent, this actually kind of opens up a lot of possibilities for this squad. And I'm actually kind of excited to see more of them get a shot, because we may not have seen this for a couple of years, and I was a little bit more excited to kind of see the Mikey Lewises, the Jordan Rosses really start to kind of get going. And again, like this is it isn't obviously not somewhere you wanted to be. You totally expected Aidan Mahaney to be back, especially the lateness in which he made that announcement. It really kind of like adds an extra sting to what happened. And this is the thing, and I was thinking about this a little bit more and more. And again, like to the point of like, well, this is a guy who was your leading scorer. He obviously was great in a number of moments, especially against Gonzaga. But I remember there were so many times, so often, that he vanished in games, and especially early on. Well, so did everybody early on for St. Mary's, but there were a number of times you looked around and went, where did he go? Thinking about the 5 for 21 against Grand Canyon, 3 for 20 against UNLV. He was very hot and cold in that second year, and I think many people watching this season would agree that you didn't see that maybe next step, that was it hitting the sophomore wall? Was it? I mean, definitely in that first year, it looked like he kind of started to run out of gas in his freshman campaign, and then this year, it looked like maybe some of the adjustments hadn't been made quite yet. And we still got to see some great performances from him. He still had 25 in what was essentially the season opener against New Mexico. He had 22 against Utah. He averaged almost 20 points a game against Gonzaga in the 3 contests that they saw each other. But against the better opponents, we saw teams make adjustments to him and be a little bit more physical with him and make him a volume shooter. Just looking at the numbers, not thinking about gameplay or anything else, in the non-conference against top 100 teams, which is 8 games, so this is not necessarily a small sample size. He shot 31% from the field against those teams, 26% from 3. So this was San Diego State, Colorado State, Boise, Utah, Grand Canyon, Xavier, UNLV. It's like these teams gave him fits. These teams really made it harder on Mahaney, and a lot of that pressure was put onto him, especially early on, because nobody else was scoring. And so you do have to take that into account as well. But teams found ways to make it difficult, and St. Mary's did not have necessarily another option at that point, or in a lot of cases throughout the course of the season. Going into next season, it does feel like St. Mary's has more options than they will have had last year, with the combinations of Hawke and Ross and Lewis, and actually even Dent, who's going to be coming in from Australia. So you have a slew of guards who are, I think, going to play a factor in what that 2-3 role is going to look like going into this coming season, going into next season. Is it a blow? Of course it is. Does it maybe shift where you think St. Mary's is going to be going into next year? I don't necessarily think it does, because I think that and maybe this sounds a little bit crazy, I think that he is the easier player to replace than Josh Jefferson. And that, to me, is the bigger question mark. That is still like the one where it's like, how do you replace someone who is dynamic as he was? And one thing that St. Mary's did do over the last week is they at least have started to fill some of that gap. And they ended up picking up Paulius Marouskas from Arizona. He will be a sophomore coming in to this coming year. Did not play all too much for Arizona last year, kind of minimal minutes. But what we did see from him was actually a pretty good turnout of what he was in Lithuania, where he's coming from. He is a countryman of Augustas Marciulionis. He's going to be able to kind of fill into minutes in the 3 or the 4. He's going to give them a dynamic that is going to be a bit different than the Josh Jefferson dynamic. I think you're going to see a little bit more, again, 3-4 hybrid, which is similar to what maybe Josh Jefferson was starting to turn into. But this is a guy who I think who's going to be able to step in immediately and help St. Mary's. So early on, St. Mary's has started to make some sort of moves and started to replace some of these. They have a couple of scholarship spots still open, so there is still opportunity to get something going over the next few weeks until the portal does close. So a little bit of time, and there are still plenty of names obviously out there. St. Mary's has been linked to a few more names. So they have been linked to some of the Duke transfers. They have been linked to a few other names as well. So still a ways to go, still thinking about what this is going to look like. The big blow to St. Mary's is that they do lose Aidan Mahaney, but they do at least pick up some of the gap with Paulius Marouskas coming over from Arizona to team up with his countryman Augustas Marciulionis.